The night that Ekon was born, nothing was normal. Not for the mother, not for the baby, and definitely not for the women who were helping to deliver him. Ekon's birth was marked by something that the people of Somika had never seen before, a violent storm. It started the second that Vesi, Ekon's mother, went into labor. She was standing in her farmland when she felt a painful tug in her protruding belly. At first, she thought it was just her baby kicking, but the pain came again, more powerful and fierce. She let out a fierce scream as her water broke, and her legs buckled beneath her as she fell to the ground. As she screamed, the air around her began to swirl, and the wind picked up speed, raising dust. People around knew that it wasn't normal, but they chose to focus instead on helping the heavily pregnant woman. Vesi was carried into her hut, and Nambi, the midwife, was called. She came with her assistants, who immediately laid Vesi on her back. The baby was ready to come out, and it had to be done immediately or complications would arise. Meanwhile, outside the hut, Somika was in a state of chaos. The wind was getting stronger, ripping through farmlands, uprooting crops, and tossing them all over the small village. Amidst all this, Vesi was screaming her lungs out, praying to the gods to help her deliver her baby. Nambi kept on reassuring her, telling her to keep pushing, that she was almost done. And sure enough, with one final push, Vesi pushed her son out of her womb. And the instant the baby left her body, everything stopped. Deathly silence fell over the village. The wind stopped blowing, leaving behind nothing but destruction. Even the animals in the bushes and the birds in the air were quiet. If a calabash broke 1,000 miles away, everyone would have heard it. That was how quiet the place became. This made Nambi and her assistants uneasy. At first, she thought the silence was abnormal because the wind had stopped. But she could also feel that she was getting something wrong, like she was missing something. And when she looked at Ekon, she knew why at once. For a baby that was only a few minutes old, he was very quiet. He wasn't crying at all. He was simply staring at her. This was supposed to be impossible, but it was happening. Ekon's eyes followed her movements as she gently picked him from one of her assistants. She then turned him around, exposing his behind. She raised her hand. There was a tradition in Somika that when a newborn baby refused to cry, they smacked them on their behind to make them cry. That first cry of a baby meant that they would be good children to their mother and also to the village. A baby that refused to cry was seen as cursed and would only bring pain and suffering to their mother and village. So, as Nambi raised her hand, ready to smack him on his smooth behind, the baby jerked once in her arm. He then turned to face her. It was as if he knew exactly what he wanted to do, and despite just being born, he could already control his body. He resumed staring at her. Her hand froze in the air, shaking nervously. Nambi felt sweat break out all across her forehead. She then lowered the baby back to the bed, beside Vesi, who was still weak from childbirth. Nambi picked up a small blade and was about to use it to cut off the umbilical cord connecting Ekon to his mother. And once more, she froze up when she saw that the baby was still staring at her intently. This time, she was terrified. The blade slipped from her fingers and clattered to the ground, breaking the spell of silence. Unable to take it anymore, Nambi ran out of the hut, screaming at the top of her lungs. She had never seen a baby like that in all her years of being a midwife. After seeing everything, none of the assistants would touch either Vesi or baby Ekon. They picked up their things and left the hut. Vesi had to cut her umbilical cord herself and also clean herself up, something that was painful and difficult for someone who had only just given birth. Unfortunately for her, though, things were about to get worse. Within a day, word had spread about Vesi and her baby that refused to cry. Nambi told everyone that Ekon had refused to allow her to touch him or even cut the cord. It was clear that Ekon was cursed, and he had to be removed from the land of the living at once. It also didn't help that his birth was marked by destruction and waste. In the aftermath of the wind, farmers had lost all their livestock, traps were destroyed, and hunters had nothing. Those who raised animals lost them as well during the storm. Ekon's was a special case because it was as if he were displaying that he was indeed cursed right from birth. People clamor and protest that Ekon must be eradicated from life before he destroys the entire Somika with his curse. Things got heated. The people were ready to go on a rampage, so Queen Sorrow and her council decided to do what they wanted. Somika was just a small village of farmers, hunters, and fishermen. She didn't have a large army that could control the mob if they got out of hand, so she chose to do as they wished. But Vesi refused to accept it. She told them that Ekon wasn't cursed. She swore that everything that happened on the day of his birth had nothing to do with him. She then told them that if they went ahead and took his life, she would place a curse on Somika, and everyone knew how potent the curse of a grieving mother was. At this, Queen Sorrow decided to use another tactic. She told them to leave Somika at once and never return. Vesi agreed. She packed up her few things, carried her baby on her back, and walked out of the village where she was born without looking back. Vesi knew that her baby was different from others, because his father was different from other men. She never told anyone, but she had gone against the wishes of Somika. She fell in love with the chief priest. Everyone knew that the chief priests were dedicated strictly to the gods of the land, because the powers of the universe ran through them. They were not allowed to have wives or children because only the gods could decide who to give their power to. Vesi and the chief priest fell in love, and they got intimate. While they kept it secret, they were both punished for their sins. Shortly after their encounter, the chief priest died in his sleep, and his replacement was chosen that same day. And for Vesi, she gave birth to a cursed child and was banished from her village. She knew that this was punishment for her choices, but she also believed that she could provide a good life for Ekon, away from Somika and everyone who knew them. She wanted a fresh start. Sadly, Ekon wasn't meant to live in hiding. They were always on the move because Ekon was always revealing just how different he was. Even as a toddler, people saw that he was different. He obeyed his mother without a fuss. When he fell, he didn't cry, and he could tell when a person was thinking and what thoughts. One time, when he was 2 years old, a wild dog ran into a hut, about to attack a little girl and her baby brother. Ekon had walked into the same hut, but not to the screaming children. He went to the dog and calmed it down by talking to it. At once, the dog that was wild became docile and walked out of the hut with its tail between its legs. It was never seen again. That very day, even before the news of what he did spread, Vesi packed up their belongings and fled. In the next village, Ekon made a child hand over a toy without a fight, and he also made the bully in the market square start dancing without music and promised not to beat anyone again. Yet again, Vesi packed up and they fled. This was how they moved from village to village, running and hoping that no one would see Ekon and think he was cursed. But then, there was only so much that Vesi could do. It was as if the eyes of the gods were following her everywhere, and she would never be able to escape them. She felt like no matter where they ran, they would always be marked. And so, she began to get tired of running and fleeing. She lost interest in everything, and she believed that her life was doomed. And one day, when Ekon was only 7 years old, he woke up in the morning and found that she was gone. She had abandoned him in a strange land where he knew no one. But Ekon wasn't scared at all. He simply got up and started to walk. He had no destination in mind. All he knew was that when he got to where he was supposed to be, he would know it. So he walked and walked for days and nights. He stopped at markets where he managed to get food to eat and clean water to drink. When he found lakes and rivers, he used them to bathe. He never stayed in one village for more than a day, so he was always on the road. One day, his legs shaking terribly as he walked slowly, he eventually stopped at a small hut in the middle of a wild bush. In that moment, he knew that he was where he was supposed to be. Then, he was so tired that he passed out right on the doorstep. His fall drew the attention of Mama Dem, who was a seer who lived in isolation from everyone else. She wasn't surprised when she saw the young boy passed out on her doorstep. She didn't ask who he was or what he wanted. She already knew that he was in the right place because she had been expecting him. Mama Dem was originally from Duvara. She could predict death, but her people saw this as an omen because whenever she said that someone was going to die, it always happened. Unfortunately, she never knew when exactly it was going to happen. At first, She tried living with her people, but they were cold to her and treated her like a leper because they saw her as the bringer of death. Things took a drastic turn for her, though, when she got another vision, and this time it wasn't just about one person. Many people were going to die, both people that she knew and those she didn't. She didn't know when it would happen or how, but she was sure that it would definitely happen. Mama Dem tried to raise an alarm, but this was only the straw that broke the camel's back. The people turned against her, and their king Tolo banished her from Duvara. From there, she went into the wild bushes to live. Her vision was yet to come true, but every day that passed, she could feel it being more imminent. And even worse, when Ekon arrived on her doorstep, she had yet another vision. This time, she saw the same thing. Lots of people dying, but Ekon was right in the middle of it all. She could see that he had powers and that if he wasn't careful, he could end up hurting everyone. So, she took him in. She treated and fed him. When he woke up, she gave him fresh clothes so that he could be more presentable. When they spoke for the first time, she realized then what exactly Ekon's powers really were. He had the gift of persuasion. He could make anyone, human or animal, do his bidding without even saying a word. He told Mama Dem that when he was a baby, even before he could speak, he had already been controlling the people around him. Vesi never had to worry about him being hungry because when he wanted to eat, he simply made her feed him. Then, Mama Dem realized just what she was dealing with and how powerful Ekon was. That kind of power, if left without control, could cause great harm to everyone. Slowly, her vision was making sense to her. The deaths she had seen would be caused by Ekon. If he didn't learn how to control his powers, he would hurt so many people. And so, as Ekon started living with Mama Dem, he started learning from her. She taught him the same skills she used when she became a seer. She taught him how to control his powers and only use them when it was necessary. They worked with animals. Ekon compelled them to come to him and then made them run off. He made two animals that were naturally predator and prey to stay side by side without one running and the other chasing. Mama Dem was certain that if she taught him everything he needed to know, then she would be able to avert the terrible vision she had from coming to pass. So, she made him promise that he would never use his powers unless he absolutely had to. The next thing she taught him was the value of discipline. He was never to give in to his emotions, especially anger. Due to who his father was, he had the power of the gods running through his veins, so in a moment of intense anger or pain, he could even bend the will of the spirits around him, and that would show by upsetting the balance of nature. Before she abandoned him, his mother, Vesi, had told him all about the circumstances surrounding his birth, but thanks to Mama Dem, he now knew the wind had been so powerful back then. It was all because of him. During their quiet moments, Mama Dem asked him where he was from, but he didn't know, because while Vesi had told him everything, she kept that bit away from him. She didn't want him to return to his hometown for any reason. They had been ready to take his life. She couldn't put it at risk again. And so time passed. Weeks turned into months as Ekon grew up into an adult who could now control his powers at will. He still lived with Mama Dem in the wild bush. She saw him as the son she never had, while he saw her as the mother that he had lost. One day, Ekon took a trip into Duvara. He wanted to buy some things in the market square, and Duvara was the closest place where he could get them. So he went there, keeping to himself like he had always done. He wore a long coat that he also used to cover his head, hiding his features. He moved through the alleys of the market, picking up the items that he needed. He then stopped at a shed where an elderly woman sold oranges. She had a basket full of them. Mama Dem loved oranges, so he decided to buy one for her. But just as he stopped before her shed, someone shoved him hard from behind. It was such a powerful shove that he pitched forward and fell to the floor. The other things that he had bought fell to the ground. He turned on the ground, wanting to know who had shoved him, but to his horror, he saw that they were robbers, about 5 of them. They were armed with daggers and swords as they stared menacingly at him. He opened his mouth, ready to order them to drop their weapons, but Mama Dem's warning came to his mind. He only used his power when he had to. So he raised his hands in surrender. They ordered him to hand over his valuables, which he did. They then turned to the elderly woman and demanded all her money. She begged them that she had not sold much yet, but that only made them furious. They turned her basket and threw her oranges on the ground, stomping them with their foot. She pleaded and begged, but they refused to listen. They grabbed her by the neck and shoved her hard against the wall of the shed. They warned her that if she didn't give them anything, they would hurt her. In desperation, she showed them everything that she had sold and how much she made, but it wasn't enough. Ekon got back to his feet, asking them to let the woman go. But one of them held a dagger to his throat and ordered him to keep quiet. Ekon's heart was beating in his chest. He wanted to use his powers, but he couldn't tell if this was the right time or not. Then one of the robbers got fed up, raised his sword, and was about to bring it down on the woman's chest. She screamed, begging him with her hands clasped. The man was grunting in rage. "Stop!" Ekon snapped before he could stop himself. The sword froze midair, then it slowly slipped from the robber's hand and fell harmlessly to the ground. The other robbers stared at him, wondering why he stopped. Even the robber himself was surprised that he dropped the sword. So he picked it back up and tried to raise it again so that he could hurt the woman. But that was impossible. He could raise the sword. It was as if his hand was resisting the act. He then looked at Ekon and knew at once that he was responsible. He ordered the other robbers to subdue him, but before they could move an inch, Ekon used his powers on them. He made them stop, drop their weapons, and run off. He also did it so that they would never rob anyone ever again. Then they returned everything they stole and ran away, leaving their weapons behind. Once they were alone again, Ekon hurried over to the elderly woman, who was massaging her neck, and as he got closer, she shrieked in fear as she leapt away from him. She accused him of being one of the robbers, because she had seen him give them orders, and they followed them without complaining. So, to her thinking, he was either one of them or worse than them. Ekon tried to tell her that he wasn't a robber, but her mind was made up. She began to scream for help, raising an alarm. Ekon picked up the goods he had bought and ran off. He could have used his powers to change her mind, but he chose not to. He didn't stop until he got to the hut in the wild bushes and told Mama Dem everything. He apologized for using his powers. She told him not to worry, that what was done, and next time he was to make sure that he tried everything else before using his powers. For the first time since he started living with Mama Dem, he didn't like this rule. He knew that if he had used his powers early enough, the elderly woman would not have been attacked. Ekon wasn't a fighter, and if he had tried to take those robbers on physically, they would have taken his life. He was hoping that following that rule wouldn't end up putting someone's life in danger. Tragically, fate was going to put him right in that kind of situation. About a few weeks after the incident at the market, Ekon had yet to leave the wild bush. He was scared of returning to the market because he knew the elderly woman probably still suspected him of being a robber, and he didn't know if she had told anyone else. The last thing he wanted was to be arrested for something that he wasn't. He realized then that if he had compelled her to forget about the incident, he wouldn't have become so scared now, and now it was too late for him to do anything about it. One evening, he had gone deep into the bushes to set traps for animals. But while he was there, he was suddenly attacked by a group of masked men. They were 3 in number. They snuck up on him. They didn't have any weapons. They simply came up behind him until they were too close. Then they pounced on him. One of them punched him hard across the jaw. He tried to fight back, but he was easily overpowered. A heavy kick sent him flying to the ground. He knew that if he remained down, then he was done for. So he rolled once and jumped to his feet, and he grabbed a stick that was lying on the ground. When the men attacked him again, he swung the stick with everything that he had, hitting one of them on the head. When he tried to strike the second one, they dodged the blow and grabbed the stick from him, throwing it far away. One of them grabbed his neck and shoved him to the ground. He was straddled, and the man raised his fists, ready to start punching him. But Ekon immediately used his powers to stop him. He ordered him to get off him, and he then told the men to fight each other instead. He stood to the side, watching them as they beat each other to a pulp. He wondered what they were doing in the bush. Had they come for him? Or did they simply stumble on him? As the thought passed through his head, he realized something. They might have also gone for Mama Dem. At once, he left the men fighting each other as he ran back through the bushes, pumping speed into his legs, going as fast as he could. As he ran, his heart was beating quickly in his chest. Birds were circling over his head, and the bushes seemed to part of their own volition, making it easy for him to run. He was scared that he wouldn't get to Mama Dem in time to rescue her. He didn't stop until he got to the hut, and sure enough, there were two men there. One of them had Mama Dem in his arms, and he also held a knife to her throat. He warned Ekon to stop at once. This time, he didn't even hesitate. Without even saying anything, he used his mind to control the man holding Mama Dem. The man released her at once and attacked the second man. They went at each other, swinging their deadly blades at each other as they fought with vengeance. Ekon hurried to Mama Dem. Thankfully, she was fine. They had not done anything to her. She told him that they had only captured her and waited for him to return. It was then that Ekon realized that indeed, they were here for him. He ordered the men to stop fighting. He then told them to confess their reasons for attacking him and Mama Dem. Just as the men opened their mouths to speak, a tiny dart zipped through the air and buried itself in Ekon's neck. He clutched his neck as he felt a sharp pain. Then his vision blurred as he let go of Mama Dem. He then fell forward and passed out. Just then, a woman stepped out of hiding. Her name was Dolly. Mama Dem recognized her at once. She was one of King Tolo's highest-ranking generals. She didn't fight the usual battles. Her tactics were stealth and infiltration. She came with more men who chained up Ekon and arrested Mama Dem as well. From there, they were all taken to the palace in Duvara. Dolly wasn't just any high-ranking official. She was always on the lookout for opportunities that would increase King Tolo's power. And a few weeks back, she got the opportunity when the elderly woman who had been robbed with Ekon reported the issue. She reported that the robbers had attacked Ekon and taken his valuables. But when he ordered them to leave her alone, they obeyed at once. At first, people dismissed her for being foolish because it didn't make sense that robbers would beat up one of their members and then take orders from the same person. She tried everything she could to get them to believe her, but they made fun of her. But Dolly was intrigued. She knew that there was more to the story than just a simple case of robbery. Over the years, in other kingdoms, she had heard of the strange boy who could control humans and animals with his mind. And she wanted to see if that was him. So, she launched her investigation, and she traced Ekon's steps back to the wild bushes. The attack was just to confirm if he could really control people with his mind, and once she saw it for herself, she stepped out and took him in. Now, she was going to offer him to her king. By the time Ekon woke up, he wasn't in chains. Instead, he was in one of the most spacious rooms he had ever been in. The bed had beautiful sheets that seemed to be made of the finest material. He looked around and saw maids waiting on him. They told him that he was in King Tolo's palace, where he was a guest. Soon, he went to see the king, who apologized for the way Dolly had treated him. King Tolo told him that he wanted to talk to him because he had a proposition. He needed Ekon's help. King Tolo was a powerful king who had armies under his command, and he wanted to unite all the kingdoms around under his rule. He believed that this was the best course of action for progress. He knew that none of them would want it because they all loved their independence, and they would even be willing to go to war. King Tolo had already won countless wars and conquered kingdoms. But war was expensive and innocent soldiers died as a result. But with Ekon, he could change the meaning of battle overnight. With Ekon on his side, they wouldn't have to go to war, and everyone would live together in unity, just as he wanted. It would be wars without bloodshed. This sounded like a great idea to Ekon. It was as if he had finally seen a way to put his powers to use. He asked for Mama Dem, and when she saw him, she told him not to take the king's deal because he couldn't trust the man. But Ekon was certain this was better because he would never forgive himself if King Tolo ended up going to war and people lost their lives as a result. And also, this was the first time he was seeing people who actually celebrated him for what he could do, instead of blaming him for ruining things he had no control over. It was a good feeling, and it was part of the reason he folded so easily. He decided to help the king. Ekon was given his personal chamber in the palace. He even ranked higher than generals who had been fighting all their lives. And Ekon himself set to work. He went into hostile kingdoms, working his way up the hierarchy until he used his powers to convince their leaders to surrender to King Tolo. Over the months, the takeover was massive. With a little nod or a phrase, Ekon toppled kingdoms. And that way, Tolo's power spread almost in the blink of an eye. The kingdoms who surrendered were not treated as prisoners, although they were made to pay taxes. On and on it went, but with time, cracks began to appear. Ekon was going through the leaders of the people, so they were the ones he used his powers on. This meant that the people themselves were still of their own mind. Many of them hated that their kingdoms had been handed over to King Tolo without a fight, and this was causing major unrest. A lot of them were going into the public, having riots and protests. To them, it was no air fight because none of them had a way to defend themselves from Ekon. However, King Tolo didn't care about all that. Instead, he was more focused on winning more kingdoms. But the next kingdom that he chose was what caused everything to get so much worse. King Tolo then asked him to speak to Queen Sorrow of Somika and use his powers to get her to surrender. Ekon had no idea that Somika was his birthplace. He believed that this was just another target for the king. When he did his investigations, he found out that Somika was only a small village with farmers, fishermen, and hunters. They were of no value at all to King Tolo. Ekon was happy though. He believed that if Somika came under King Tolo's rulership, they would become more prosperous. So he did just that. He went on horseback to see the queen. He used his powers to worm his way freely into Queen Sorrow's palace, and once he had her in his sights, he ordered her to surrender to King Tolo's forces. She gave the order, and at once, her soldiers gave up their arms and surrendered. As King Tolo took over the village, Ekon got back on his horse and began the ride back to Duvara. And when he was some miles away from the village, he turned around for a final look, and what he saw made his insides turn. Thick black smoke was rising off the village. Somika was on fire. At once, he turned his horse around and began to ride it at top speed back to Somika. He couldn't understand what had happened. Did his powers fail? Did the queen's soldiers still go on to take up arms? How had things changed so drastically? When he got to Somika, it was a scene of destruction. Huts were on fire. King Tolo's soldiers were using their swords to cut down everyone in Somika, both guards and villagers alike. Nobody was spared. He also saw that none of the guards were armed or defending themselves. He was the one who made them unable to put up a fight. This wasn't what King Tolo had promised him. In anger, he shouted for everyone to stop, and all around him, the soldiers froze, unable to move. Even the birds in the sky stopped flying. He looked around at the carnage. He saw an elderly woman stagger out of a hut that was on fire. She had a wound on her stomach. When she saw Ekon, she staggered towards him, and he caught her before she fell. She then told him that she could recognize him anywhere because of his eyes. They had never changed even now that he was a grown man. She then told him her name. It was Nambi. She was the midwife his mother had told him all about. She helped bring him into this world and had also played a role in getting them banished from Somika. With her dying breath, she told him that she didn't regret what she did that day. He was indeed cursed. He got his own mother banished, and now he opened up his birthplace to King Tolo, who had now massacred almost all his people. Suddenly, everything was coming back to him. They had never escaped the curse. This was what Mama Dem's vision was warning him about. Mama Dem had always known that he would bring about so much death, and he had unknowingly done just that. She taught him how to control his powers so that he didn't hurt anyone, and he still went on to do that. When Nambi breathed her last, Ekon felt his own heart tighten in his chest. He let out a howl of pain so severe that all around him, King Tolo's soldiers began to clutch their necks as they struggled to suck in air. He was controlling them. He had ordered them not to breathe anymore. He left Nambi there, and as he got back on the horse, every single soldier present in Somika fell to the ground, never to rise again. He rode the horse like a man possessed. He went straight to the palace. The guards there tried to stop him, but they didn't even get to pull their weapons before they started fighting each other. Ekon was angry. He marched through the palace until he saw King Tolo. He then ordered the king to tell him everything. Unable to resist, King Tolo confessed that they had always known that he was from Somika. Dali had done the investigation, tracing every single place that he lived until they stopped at the small village. He then said that the reason he ordered his soldiers to burn it down was that the other kingdoms were rioting, and they needed to be taught a lesson. They had to believe that he was capable of wiping out an entire kingdom if he wanted. That way, the leaders and their people will finally accept him as their new ruler, and they will live by his rules and pay his taxes, no matter how high it was. None of this would have been possible without Ekon's help. Realizing that he had been used, his anger only increased. But this time, the control that Mama Dem had been so scared of was gone. Ekon unleashed his full power. Even the spirits were at his mercy. All around him, the wind began to pick up, blowing strongly. Dali ran at him, sword raised so that she could strike him down. But he immediately used his powers on her, causing her to turn on her own king. They began fighting each other, but she was more experienced than he, so she easily defeated him by sending her sword into his heart. As King Tolo fell to the floor, Dali continued fighting other soldiers. It was pure chaos in the palace. The strong winds were destroying everything that wasn't pinned down. The soldiers who were not fighting each other were being picked up by the wind. The roof of the palace was wrenched up and flung away. Pillars broke in two. Trees snapped like broomsticks. Everyone was at the mercy of Ekon. People and debris were being carried as if they weighed nothing. Seeing all this, Mama Dem knew that if she did nothing, Ekon's anger would destroy the entire world. As the walls of the palace were pulled up as well, Mama Dem began pushing towards him. She was going deep into the eye of the storm, right where Ekon was. All he could think of was chaos and carnage. Nothing else mattered. She kept pushing. A branch of a tree slapped into her head as it was pulled by the wind, causing her to stagger backward. She was almost lifted off her feet, but she remained steady. She continued pushing, one step at a time, her clothes flapping in the wind. She raised her hands, ready to touch Ekon. Just then, a soldier who was carried by the wind knocked into her, causing her to lose her balance. With a scream, she was knocked off her feet, and at once, the wind picked her up. But before it whisked her away, she reached out and grabbed Ekon by the front of his chest, screaming his name. "Stop this!" she cried. "This is not you." The wind was too strong, pulling her away from him, but she held on for dear life. "You have to stop this!" she screamed. "Control yourself." Just then, the wind yanked at her. She let go of him, ready to land wherever the wind threw her. But just as she was about to be flung away, Ekon reached out and grabbed her hand, holding on tightly as he pulled her closer to himself. He then closed his eyes, forcing himself to regain control of his mind. Slowly, the wind died down, and everything crashed to the ground. All around them were bodies of the soldiers. The palace lay in ruins, and the reign of King Tolo was over. Ekon began to cry. He had never wanted any of this. He had done everything he was not supposed to. Mama Dem told him to follow her, and together, they left Devara and returned to the wild bushes to continue living. Every kingdom taken over by King Tolo regained its independence. The survivors in Somika began to rebuild, and the people of Devara gave themselves a new king who wasn't so hungry for power. He and Mama Dem remained in the bushes, keeping an eye on the world. This was the price he had to pay. Now Ekon knew why she insisted he only used his power when it was extremely important. Because it was so easy to get carried away with too much power, and that can be disastrous. While they remained in isolation, everyone now knew who they were. Parents told tales of the man who could make any human or animal obey him. This was the start of his legend, and his name was Ekon. Today the world knows Professor X as the most powerful mind that ever lived. A man who can reach into any thought, bend any will, stop any enemy without ever raising a hand. A man who could rule the entire world with a single command, and chooses every single day not to. The world calls it fiction. But long before that story was ever drawn on a page, Africa already knew the truth of it. The idea of a man who could command any mind, human or beast, who could end a war with a whisper, who carried a power so vast that the only real danger was himself, is older than any comic book. It lived in the oldest legends of the continent, in the tales of those born with the voice that could not be refused, and the terrible burden of knowing when to use it and when to stay silent. Ekon was one of those legends, a boy the world called cursed, born in a storm, feared before he could speak, hunted from village to village, abandoned by the one person who was supposed to protect him. He carried a power that could make anyone obey, and everyone who saw it wanted to use it or destroy it or own it. But Ekon's story was never about the power to control others. It was about the far harder power, the power to control himself. An old seer taught him the rule that would define his life, that a gift this great must almost never be used, because the moment you begin to bend the world to your will, you start to lose the line between saving people and ruling them. He learned it, he lived by it, and when a king finally convinced him that his power could end wars without bloodshed, he believed he had found the good he was meant to do. He was wrong, and it cost him everything. He watched his own birthplace burn because of a command he gave. He felt the weight of every life his gift had touched, and in his grief and rage, he became for one terrible moment the exact thing the seer had always feared, a man whose power answered to nothing but his own pain. And then he stopped himself. That was the moment he truly became a legend. Not when he conquered kingdoms, not when he brought a tyrant down, but when he looked at the storm pouring out of his own broken heart and chose to close his hand and walk away from all of it. He wore no wheelchair of gadgetry. He built no school in a faraway mansion. He was an African boy with the voice that could not be refused, who learned the hardest lesson any powerful person ever learns, that the greatest strength is not in what you can make others do, but in what you refuse to do to them. The most powerful mind was never simply the invention of a comic book studio. The blueprint was drawn in the ancient kingdoms of Africa, in the legends of those who could command the will of the world, and carried the terrible wisdom to know they never should. Ekon's story was almost lost to time, buried under the same fear that once tried to bury him. But some legends refused to stay in the dark. This was his. And now you know where the legend of the most powerful mind truly began.